More new details about the suspect in the murders.
One of the oldest crimes in finance being supercharged by some of these.
Breaking news after a massive search for missing 7-year-old.
Crime is a fact of human species, a fact of that species alone. But it is above all the secret aspect, impenetrable and hidden. Crime hides, and by far, the most terrifying things are those which elude us. These words from French philosopher and anthropologist Georges Bataille succinctly capture the importance of studying crime and criminal behaviors. Without the expertise and dedication of experts, crimes would remain shrouded in mystery, perpetuating fear and terror in the society. Bringing justice to victims of crime is a labor-intensive task that involves the expertise of many professionals. From the officers on the front lines to the specialists working diligently behind the scenes to the courts, all coming from specialized fields. Criminology, criminal psychology, forensic sciences, sociology, criminal justice, and many more. Today, we will delve into the world of crime analysts who tirelessly piece together information to uncover truth behind the crime. This is Career Calling, and I'm your host, Pratibha Pandit. Today, I'm speaking with my guest, Namrata Srikanth, about what it takes to be a crime analyst. Namrata holds an undergraduate degree in criminal psychology and sociology from William & Mary, a master's degree in forensic psychology from the George Washington University, and has built a career in the intelligence field as a crime analyst. Namrata, welcome to Career Calling.
Hello, thank you so much for having me.
As a true crime junkie who consumes a lot of crime stories, this is one of the most fascinating topics that I am looking forward to. So thank you for joining. A lot of our understanding of what happens behind the crime scene is colored by what we see in the pop culture, what we see in the movies and the shows. So I want to start by asking you, tell us, who is a crime analyst? What are the types of analysis they could be involved in?
Yeah, so the idea of a crime analyst is like pretty broad because there are a lot of different scopes that you can go into. But at the core, what a crime analyst or any type of analyst does is you are looking at patterns and trends. And so you can either look at it in a qualitative setting, that's what I do. When you talk about being a qualitative analyst, you're looking at reports or you're kind of reading a lot of information and you have to pick apart what is in front of you and find out what is important. And you're kind of selecting the details that you're like, this is something that's really important. And then this is like the rabbit hole that I'm going to go down to really uncover like, the truth. And then you can do more quantitative analysts. So, a lot of that could be maybe more like financial analysts or stuff like that, or like fraud analysts or something like that, where you're kind of looking more at like, like numbers and that kind of stuff. So you can really pick your strengths and there's a lot of different types of professions and different ways that being an analyst and crime can overlap.
So all of these types of analyst roles are primarily with the law enforcement departments, or are there other organizations involved?
Yeah, so a lot of times you'll be working in conjunction with some type of law enforcement or some agency. You can work at, FBI, like CIA, like marshals, Secret Service, even like local police departments all have different type of analyst positions. There's also a lot of, private sector jobs that you can do analyst work for. There's also nonprofit or other types of government agencies that aren't exactly law enforcement. So some of it might be more research based. There is a lot of different things like fusion centers that have do a lot of analyst work as well. So you can kind of go through a lot of different routes. Though I will say that the most popular is probably working with either a local police department or a federal agency, just because that's like the more specialized type of work and just
Mhm.
they just have a lot more of those opportunities available.
Mhm. Now, you talked about different types of analysis. Is the training the same? Like you did your undergrad in criminal psychology and sociology, double major, and your master's in forensic psychology. I want to understand, is the training similar or are there, you start branching out when you go to grad school?
You could definitely start to specialize a little bit more in grad school, but at least in my experience, a lot of the training that I've received is through my job. And a lot of, your grad school and other internships, it really serves as exposure and you get to learn different aspects of the field. You get to interact
Hmm.
with the different databases. You can learn how different agencies conduct their business and stuff like that. So it's like that type of experience that's really helpful, and with regards to grad school, it definitely taught me a lot about the subject matter and
Hmm.
really helped, like, 1, give myself more experience and meet a lot more people, but, I would say that, like, a lot of the day-to-day work as an analyst, I've definitely learned more on the job, and it's kind of hard because each department, each agency, each type of analyst is very different and very specific, and even a crime analyst in one agency may function very differently as a crime analyst in another agency. The types of reports that you are going to be building is going to be completely different. So it's a lot of just kind of learning like the core skill set of how to be able to absorb a lot of information and figure out what's important, like it's kind of those types of skills, like those core skills that are really important to learn and then you can just apply them in different ways.
Hmm. How does the education itself prepare you? Help me understand what kind of skills and the foundation does education give you? Criminal psychology, sociology, and forensic psychology. What does it prepare you for?
I think for me, a lot of what it helped prepare me for is just kind of understanding more of like just the general subject matter. I took an interrogation and interviewing class in my grad school. And so just that class really helped me. You learn, the different aspects, like what is the difference between an interview and an interrogation in a
Mhm,
criminal standpoint? Like what are the different tactics that you would use and like what makes a good interview and what makes a bad interviewer. And while I am not like an officer, so I don't conduct interviews or interrogations, I can still take what I learned from that class in my job right now. So if I'm calling, like a reporting person or a victim, then I can kind of understand like how am I approaching this topic? I'm approaching this as more of an interview. I'm trying to gather information. So how should I present myself? How should I present these questions and stuff like that?
mhm,
So, a lot of what this field is, it's changing all the time and it's very fluid. So, you go to all these classes, you learn all these things, you learn these theories, and you learn these tactics, and you may not be able to utilize it in the same exact way that they teach it in the class. But
mhm.
if you can take those skills and you can implement it in different ways and kind of maneuver it to help you become like a stronger employee or analyst in whatever setting.
Mhm, very great. You talked about how different it can be from agency to agency. I wanted to understand how universal the education itself, like some areas, for example, medicine. Even if you get a medical degree in one country, you cannot just go and start a practice in another country. You have to go through the rigor of the whole training and the tests and everything that is applicable to that country. Do you think that this field is similar? Like if somebody gets, say, you have a criminals, you have your education here in the United States, would it be applicable if you want to go and work somewhere else in another country and vice versa? If somebody has a degree from some other country, can they come and train here? Like, is that a possibility?
I would say, I mean, it's definitely a possibility, and we do have a lot of, international organizations that like do have people from different countries working together for these
Hmm.
topics. It's not as standardized as like medicine or even like data science is. I would say like even between agencies, the type of standardization is in terms of the common databases that agencies use. At least in my experience in my job field, we use a lot of open source intelligence databases.
Hmm.
And so getting trained on how to utilize those databases are things that can carry on no matter what company you're at, no matter what agency you're at, because the training on those
Mhm.
databases is pretty standard, but a lot of what is different and, like, harder to train is, like, what you do with that information that you get from the database, right? Like, how you take that information and how you put it in a report and how you document it, and, like, you get all this information, but one agency might be looking for, like, just like group A type of information from the database, and another agency might be utilizing the database in a completely different way.
Mhm.
Um, so that is kind of where it can get a little bit harder when you are, like, trying to carry over things, but a lot of it is just kind of, understanding how to build the reports and trying to figure out who is this report going to? And a lot of for us, it's going to either law enforcement or it's going to government, and it's, playing some part in the criminal justice system. So having
Mhm.
that understanding on what the United States criminal justice system needs in terms of, like, documentation and, like, stuff like that is definitely helpful.
Mhm. What about the other industries? For example, there is a qualitative analysis and a quantitative analysis, and there are a lot of other fields that utilize quantitative analytics. For example, a data scientist who could be working in some sort of a data, a general purpose data analysis skills. How important is it to have the background in the psychology, the criminal psychology and the forensic, for these folks if they want to switch over? Like, is it essential, or can there somebody who has the general purpose data analysis skills can also, or is any form of qualitative or quantitative analysis can come and play a role here?
Yeah, no, I don't think you need, like, that background at all in social science. You can,
Oh.
we that's one of the great things about the field is you do have a lot of people with different backgrounds. I know in my grad program there was someone who majored in marine biology who decided last minute to switch fields, and she came
Mhm.
to the field. A lot of, the analyst work is, like, you can be trained in it, which is really
Uh-huh.
good, and, you learn it. That's, like, a lot of it for me, I learned a lot of it in my job, but it's just, like, having those core skills and that it's, like, having that way of thinking is one of, like,
Uh-huh.
the most important thing, like, being able to look at something and be able to draw the more important details, be able to, like, be able to find the big picture and stuff like that. So that way of thinking that's important. So I don't think it's not needed to have that exact background. It definitely
Mhm.
helps in some ways, but I wouldn't say it's crucial. You can definitely, like, transfer it in and stuff like that. I've seen a lot of people, like, transfer in from, like, engineering or something like that and come in, and it's kind of one of the great things about the field is you have so many different people with different backgrounds, and you kind of see how those different backgrounds help them approach, a report in a completely different way. And you're
Mhm.
like, "Oh, I would never have thought to, like, look at the situation in this way, but
Mhm.
you did." And now, like, that helps open my eyes to, like, a brand new way of, like, approaching things.
Awesome. Now, looks like, which is true for a lot of the professions, is the practical training, on job training, internships, and stuff like that. Tell me about it. How do one approach? Where do you find, how do you find, like, how do you go about finding that practical exposure to find the internships? Walk me through that process.
Yeah, no, so that one is definitely, like, really hard and really tricky. So, at least for me, I kind of decided later in college, I was like, I'm really interested in this field. I'm gonna try it out. I had no prior experience with anything law enforcement like at all. And at least for me, I was just like, I want to think about working for the FBI. At that point, that was my goal. And so I kind of just, like, went on different forums and I went to see, like, what type of, like, other type of job positions and stuff like that. So I saw a lot of things for a crime analyst. And so I would look at crime analyst internships, and I would just find a lot of different websites, and I would just, like, apply. I would apply for those, or I would, see jobs that I really wanted, and then I would look at what their qualifications and their requirements were. And a
Mhm.
lot of these places do value professional experience. And so I would just kind of, like, look at other people who work at the organization, look at their LinkedIn and see where they've interned and things like that. So a lot of it was just a lot of random digging, but,
Investigation,
definitely.
already putting investigation skills.
Yeah, yeah, just going like, just looking at everyone that I could and just kind of seeing what they did, but a lot of the internships, you find a lot at local police departments. There's also a lot of agencies, or you have a lot of different, like with the DHS or the DOJ, they have a lot of different like federal government internships in all
Mhm.
these different sectors, which is really great and really awesome. So those are definitely places to like start looking. I would like recommend if people are trying to look at internships. One of the great things about like this day and age is, there's so many different like websites, so many different forums online, like, even if it's like Reddit or Quora or even on like LinkedIn, people have a post or something like that. You can really find
Mhm.
anything, and there's a lot of people who give advice. So I think I kind of went on like 7 different places. I don't think there was a specific one that I
Mhm.
latched onto.
Mm, mhm. Now, one of the aspects that often gets overlooked is the personality aspect of it, right? Like, for example, if you want to be a salesperson, it benefits if you're an outgoing person, for example. So that's one aspect that I see when people start thinking about a profession, kind of gets sidelined or not looked at. When I look at this field, you are coming up close with pretty distressing crime situations, I would imagine, on a day to day basis. I mean, you worked in a homicide unit, you're working in a child trafficking type of crime scenarios. Pretty, you know, difficult to digest type of crime situations. I have two questions related to that. One, how do you cope emotionally when your every day involves, watching these type of crimes or coming close to these type of crimes? And two, are there any specific personalities that you think would thrive in this field?
Yeah, that one's definitely really, really hard because, no matter what type of personality you have, like it's not an easy field, and there's no perfect personality. Everyone gets affected by this job in some way or the other, but it's all about kind of, I think for me it's all about perspective and your coping mechanisms. For me, the perspective that's really helped is, when I see something at work that I'm like, this is terrible or something like that, what has helped me a lot is knowing that, okay, why am I seeing this? I'm seeing this
Mhm,
because I'm doing something about it, or someone is doing something about it. It's
mhm,
like it's not getting lost in the void or anything like that. So for me, whenever I see something really sad or like terrible, I process it for a minute, but I'm like, okay, like, but the good thing is something is being done.
mhm,
A lot of people in this field, you don't always get to see that resolution, especially as an analyst. You do a lot of the background work,
mhm,
and you do a lot of the finding the information, and then you give it to the next person for them to act on it.
mhm,
So you don't always know what happens after the fact,
mhm,
and that can be something that's really hard, but I try and just kind of focus on my job and my role and
mhm,
not try and think too much about the things that I can't really control.
mhm, mhm,
So, I think, at least for me so far, that kind of perspective has really helped. I think one of the biggest things in terms of coping is
mhm,
realizing that you're going to be affected. I think the hardest
mhm,
part is when people come into the job or the field and they're like, "Oh, my life is going to be the same." And
mhm,
I'm like, "You can't do this job well and not be affected by the things you see or the things that you read."
mhm,
That's simply not possible because you have to be an empathetic person. Everyone who comes into this field is, like, at their core, like, an empathetic person. They care about people. They care
mhm,
about making things right or better and stuff like
mhm,
that. Again, going to surrounding yourself with good people, because a lot of times you see the worst in humanity, like, day in and day out. You see, like,
mhm,
the worst people, like, you read the worst things, and
mhm,
so when you leave work, just being surrounded by people who like kind of be like, you know what, there are some terrible people out there, but there's also some good things. And
mhm,
keeping things in your life like hobbies or stuff that is completely different and not
mhm,
related to your job,
mhm,
that is just like more carefree and lighthearted and just kind of reminds you that,
mhm,
your work is important, but your work is not everything. Like there's other things in life for you too.
mhm.
So, at least for
Cool.
me, those are the things that have definitely helped, but, it is definitely a profession and a career field that really does kind of alter your perspective on things.
Mhm, mhm. Another question that came to my mind earlier when you were talking about different types of roles in an analyst, is it mostly the analyst role comes into picture after the crime to build up the case, or there are analyst roles for crime prevention, like even before that happened?
There are, like, crime prevention, like, roles and stuff like that. I would say I don't know a lot about that particular field, but I would think that a lot of that is definitely more research based, and that would kind of go more into, like, social work programs and stuff like that,
Mhm,
and kind of that is where I would say with I did an undergrad in like sociology and criminology. And so a lot of those theories on like, why crime happens, like what and who motivates people into criminal activities. A lot of
mhm,
those theories are helpful. And then so you are kind of trying to
mhm,
create social settings to either prevent or, like, de-incentivize crime. So there definitely are, like analyst positions, but I think those might be more research based. But a lot of it, at least from what I'm familiar, is a little bit more like after the fact, is where,
mhm,
you have all the information and you're trying to just piece it all together.
mhm,
And you're have all these people, you have all the and you're trying to either find out more things, you take like a little breadcrumb and then try and get like 700 more pieces to the puzzle, or
mhm.
you have like a million pieces and you're trying to determine what is the most important.
What about in the internet scenarios where there may be, YouTube channels or some other, Twitter feeds or anything? The companies themselves do a lot to prevent suspicious behaviors, but is there a role to play there where, a suspicious behavior can be prevented from becoming a crime?
Yeah, so there's definitely a lot of tech companies have it's either in their compliance or their trust and safety
Hmm.
positions. So a lot of it will be kind of like after the fact where, you have a user that is being reported for some
Hmm.
type of criminal activity,
Hmm.
and that is kind of where the tech companies and different types of government agencies have that partnership where they're like,
Hmm.
"Hey, we have this user who's been reported of this type of suspicious behavior. We're going to
Hmm.
pull whatever information we can and send it to you guys."
Hmm.
And then the analyst kind of goes through that data and is like, "All right, what happened? We have this like, IP address or whatever. What can we do with that? And what kind
Hmm.
of piece of report can we build?" And then it goes to the next person. In terms of prevention in that type of sense, again, that is probably more research slash policy based, but it
Hmm.
is a very big and important question for just
Hmm.
like trust and safety in general. Just as, internet and apps are growing and like blowing up, and you have a lot of kids who are just kind of in these vulnerable spaces who are being taken advantage of all the time. So there definitely is a lot of room for potential improvement in the prevention of,
Hmm.
crime on the internet.
Cool, cool. That makes sense. Now, what are some of the you kind of touched upon it at the beginning, but I wanted to kind of understand what does a career ladder looks like in this field? Like what are like from an analyst, what are the paths that it can take from here? Like, if somebody who spends say 10, 15 years or 20 years in this field, what does that career ladder look like?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I think it really depends, and that's kind of why it's like so great. You can go a lot of different ways. You
Hmm.
can, start as an analyst and then work on to doing more, either like working into like policy initiatives. You can start as an analyst and go through more like management and really try and work with other agencies. You can also
Hmm.
become an agent or
Hmm.
something like
Hmm.
that at another agency. So there are a lot of different ways that you can grow in this field. There's a lot of people who start as an analyst and they're like, I want to go into treatment, or I want to do evaluations for these people, or I've like learned a lot and I want to go and do lectures or something like that. So
Hmm.
I don't think that there is necessarily just like one way, and I think with there's a lot of different ways that you can kind of use your skills at like
Hmm.
in as an analyst and kind of apply it in a lot of different ways.
Tell me a little bit more about the treatment part of it. What is that field?
Yeah, so for in forensic psychology, you can also do a treatment or evaluation for
Mhm,
people. So
Uh-huh.
a lot of it is, you could do evaluations for offenders. So if you're
Mhm.
either partnering with police or some other agency and you have someone who's accused of a crime or offender and you do an evaluation with them, you see if they have
Mhm.
or do they have a mental competency? Do they
Mhm.
have
Mhm.
a mental
Okay.
illness that may affect them
Mhm.
and might affect the way that they are going to be
Mhm.
tried in court or something like that. They also have a lot of you can also do forensic interviewing. So
Mhm.
especially when it comes to interviewing kids or children who
Mhm.
were either victims or witnesses to a crime, having a special interviewer to kind of understand how to broach these topics with kids and stuff like that. So a lot of that is a little bit more of I would say like scientific background because you
Mhm.
are learning about to recognize different ways that a mental illness or something will be seen in a person,
Mhm.
and then you
Mhm.
have to evaluate them, and then you then diagnose them.
Mhm.
So that is a really, big and, popular avenue that a lot of people take. That one, you definitely need to get a PhD, and I would say that
Mhm.
one is definitely a little bit more, um, has a little bit more requirements,
Mhm.
but it has you're learning the specific illnesses, all the symptoms, you have to get
Mhm.
trained in it, you have to, pass the exam and everything.
So I want to take you back to your high school. And I want to ask you, how did you get attracted? Was it something that you came across in high school, somebody around you, or how did you get attracted to this field? And what was your journey from there to getting formally trained?
Yeah, so I actually didn't really know that I wanted to do this field until college. I
Mhm.
went into college thinking I wanted to do physical therapy, then kind of realized I didn't really want that. And I was already taking psychology classes.
Uh-huh.
And then I took a criminology class my sophomore year, and I just thought it was interesting and thought it was really fascinating. And then at that time, I was going down a lot of rabbit holes about different type of, crime cases that were just taking over the news cycle. And I think I really suddenly just decided that I really wanted to be an FBI agent. I think for me, I really liked the idea of helping people, but interacting with people and kind of figuring out the why. That's always been something like a question that I've always had, even as a kid, is understanding why people do what they do
Mhm.
and just
Mhm.
kind of figuring out those types of puzzles. And
Mhm.
was after I really liked my criminology class, and I started doing a little bit more research, and I was like, "You know what? I think this is gonna be a really interesting and good field," and I kind
Mhm.
of just went for it. So that's why I started looking at even grad programs just because I knew that I was like, I really wanna get more experience in doing
Mhm.
internships and learning more about the field in different agencies.
Mhm.
And I was even looking at the requirements and, having a master's degree helps you,
Mhm.
especially if you're looking at federal employment because they operate with the GS scale.
Mhm.
So I was just like, you know what? I think I'd like to do grad school. I want to learn a little bit more and really try and figure out what type of agent I want to be. If I want to do counterterrorism, if I want to do cybersecurity or whatever it was, and
Mhm.
just kind of learn more about the field and the different theories and tactics needed.
Mhm.
And so that's kind of what drove me to do a master's program. And then it was a little bit during my master's program that I started thinking about it a little bit more and I was like, you know what? I don't know if being an agent is for me. I
Mhm.
but I really do like the analyst work. Like I like kind of doing the background work and just using my mind. And so that's kind of how I ended up doing a more crime analyst position.
Mhm. So the agents are more involved in direct crime scenes versus the analyst. Is that the right assessment?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I mean, it's really, hard and tough work, and I think for me, what I realized where I wouldn't be a great agent is that, you do have a lot of that face-to-face conversation with victims
Mhm.
and stuff like that, and,
Yeah.
we were talking earlier about how to compartmentalize in this job, and I think
Mhm.
I realized early on, luckily, that I think the idea of, having to be the one to speak to the victim on, what is the hardest
Mhm.
day of their life is something
Mhm.
that I didn't know if I was confident in my ability to compartmentalize that.
Yeah. Mhm.
And so that's kind of where I was just like, I think that part of the job might be too much for me. And so I was like, I think I want to stick a little bit more to the background slash the research work.
Yeah, yeah. So looks like a lot of, research is a lot of the, deciding the path is really learning from who have done it, right? That's how you
Yeah.
go about this job. That's really great to know. Are there any resources that you would suggest anybody who is interested in this field and want to build a career? What are some of the, resources that you would recommend?
One of the biggest things that, like, at least that I did a lot when I was, still in undergrad was just I would look at the types of positions and jobs that I really wanted, whether it was being an agent or whatever it was, and look at just like what the basic qualifications are
Hmm.
and just really setting yourself up so you can get that. If
Hmm.
they're like, to be in this, you need at least like 1 year of like work experience in these fields or understanding how to use a certain type of tool or a database or knowledge in a certain type of field or whatever it was. A lot of it you don't even really have to like talk to people, but kind of just like looking at those job qualifications and seeing
Hmm.
what is
Hmm.
happening. Another thing is just really just kind of doing research and understanding like what is up and coming in the
Hmm.
field. And even because especially when you're talking about like crime, it is such a fluid field. It's something that's ever changing. It is affected by what's happening in society, like new technology advancements and etc. So really just knowing what is, like, happening and having some type of awareness on, like, okay, how does this affect, a role as an analyst? Or how does this new technology how could that possibly affect the way that crime is perceived or something like that? So,
Hmm.
I think a lot of that, and then just maybe even just looking at the different work like, agencies and organizations in whatever field you're trying to do and, like, what they are doing and the different resources that they put out because
Hmm.
there are a lot of just, like, free trainings that you can sign up for that can be really helpful as well.
Cool, cool. Thank you so much, Namrata. This has been a very informative session. I learned a lot today. I'm sure a lot of the audience who would be interested in this field have come to learn a lot as well. I wish you all the best in your career and thank you so much again for your time.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
To learn more about this field, visit American Academy of Forensic Sciences, aafs.org, or American Society of Criminology, asc41.com. You can also find information on the university websites that offer programs in criminology, criminal and forensic psychology, or criminal justice. This is Career Calling, and I'm your host, Pratibha Pandit. Thank you for tuning in.